Today is March 25th. Today, Satan is on a leash. Let's read from the book of Matthew, the next paragraph, starting in verse 32. Matthew 9:32 to 34. After they had gone away, a demon-possessed man who was mute was brought to him. When the demon had been cast out, the one who had been mute spoke. And the crowds were amazed and said, "Never has anything like this been seen in Israel." But the Pharisees began saying, "By the ruler of the demons, he casts out demons." Now, yesterday, as we were looking at the passage where Jesus healed two blind men, we read from the book of Isaiah, where the Messiah will give sight to the blind and a voice to the mute. It's like Matthew has that in mind when he writes his gospel here. But I wanted to focus on the Pharisees' reaction. They said, well, he is casting out demons by the prince of demons, by the ruler of the demons. The nature of this healing shows that the man was demonized. He had lost his voice because of some demon that had influenced him. Now, the Old Testament really doesn't talk much about demons, much less the ruler of demons. But we do get Job chapters 1 and 2, where we hear about Satan. Let's read those chapters. Stick around afterwards. I want to make a few comments.
Job 1 and 2, verses 1 through 10, New Revised Standard Version. There was once a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. That man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He had 7,000 sheep, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, and very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. His sons used to go and hold feast in one another's houses in turn, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the feast days had run their course, Job would send and sanctify them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." This is what Job always did. Then one day the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser came among them. The Lord said to the accuser, "Where have you come from?" The accuser answered the Lord, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." The Lord said to the accuser, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil." The accuser answered the Lord, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a fence around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand now and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face." The Lord said to the accuser, "Very well, all that he has is in your power, only do not stretch out your hand against him." So the accuser went out from the presence of the Lord. One day, when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the eldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing, and the donkeys were feeding beside them, and the Sabeans fell on them and carried them off, and killed the servants with the edge of the sword. I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another came and said, "The fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another came and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 columns and made a raid on the camels and carried them off and killed the servants with the edge of the sword. I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another came and said, "Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house, and suddenly a great wind came across the desert, struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they are dead. I alone have escaped to tell you." Then Job arose, tore his robe, shaved his head, and fell on the ground and worshipped. He said, "Naked I come from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrongdoing. Job 2, verses 1 through 10. One day the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser also came among them to present himself before the Lord. The Lord said to the accuser, "Where have you come from?" The accuser answered the Lord, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." The Lord said to the accuser, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. He still persists in his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him for no reason." Then the accuser answered the Lord, "Skin for skin, all that the man has he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face." The Lord said to the accuser, "Very well, he is in your power, only spare his life." So the accuser went out from the presence of the Lord and inflicted loathsome sores on Job from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Job took a potsherd with which to scrape himself and sat among the ashes. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still persist in your integrity? Curse God and die." But he said to her, "You speak as any foolish woman would speak. Shall we receive good from God and not receive evil?" In all this Job did not sin with his lips.
So here in the book of Job, we're introduced to a figure called the Satan, the accuser, the one who presents a case to the Lord against someone. That someone happens to be Job in the book of Job. Satan is not called the ruler of the demons. In fact, in the Old Testament, there is no ruler of the demons. There are simply fallen angels. Rarely does the Old Testament talk about demonic activity. Rather, it talks about false gods. The Satan in the book of Job is given authority to take away Job's wealth, his possessions, to take away Job's family, and finally to take away Job's health. But ultimately, when we look at the figure of the Satan in the book of Job, he is on a leash. He can do nothing that God does not allow him to do. And God is there afterwards to correct what Satan has done. So what do we do today? We recognize that Satan is indeed on a leash. Are you facing attack? Look to the Lord. Ask him to help you. Scripture reading from the New Revised Standard Version by Emily Herrera. Let's Find Out Together has a companion podcast called Salty Saints. Zach Kelly and I discuss apologetics, theology, and Scripture. Look for Salty Saints on your favorite podcast app.